Hi, I'm Steve Garrett. As a senior citizen and a senior Rotarian, I'm often asked, what would I do to improve Rotary, to improve community, to improve the world? What one action would do it? And I would say, if I could get every Rotary Club in the world to adopt policy governance as how they run their club, I think that would be something that would really be very beneficial to everybody involved. So let's talk a little bit about policy governance. In general, Rotary clubs seem to make a series of decisions, one decision after another. Sometimes they're not consistent with each other, sometimes they're not related, and they're hard for people to predict what kind of a decision a Rotary Club board of directors might make. The more successful Rotary clubs, the ones who accomplish more, who have more people, who have longer tenure, they are governed by policies. In fact, Rotary International has a policy governance procedure to themselves, and if you go on their website, you can download the code of policy, all of the policies of Rotary International. So why shouldn't a Rotary Club, every Rotary Club, have policies that they use to govern their Rotary Club? But what is it? How does this work? Now, I've been very fortunate to have been involved over several decades in organizations, boards of directors that utilize policy governance. In fact, I went to board of directors school several decades ago, and it was a class taught by a guy named John Carver. In fact, John Carver back in the 1970s literally wrote the book on policy governance. Policy governance is a method that describes how the board of directors deals with the organization itself, how they are governed. And it's got several principles that are really kind of important. One of those principles is that the board of directors speaks with one voice or it doesn't speak at all. And here's an important part. How many times have I seen controversies erupt when the board of directors addresses a certain item, somebody on the board disagrees with it, after the board makes the decision one way or the other, then the person on the board who disagreed goes out and starts to campaign among the members of the club to reverse the decision of the board of directors. This causes mayhem. It causes people to not trust the board of directors. It doesn't benefit anybody. Another governance policy is that the board of directors speaks through policy. They don't make ad hoc decisions. They make policy decisions from which all other decisions flow. If they don't like the way it's working, they change the policy. Another part of policy governance is the board of directors makes broad policies, wide policies, all-inclusive policies, and they narrow them as necessary. They don't make small policies that only apply to a certain circumstance, and then you have to make the new policy every time, the ad hoc decision. And another thing about the policy governance is that the board of directors is in charge of making their own processes. They don't apply other processes from outside. They don't always apply the process of the previous board of directors. They don't apply the processes prescribed by some other organization. The board of directors is the governing part of the organization. In this case, what we're talking about is a Rotary Club. So let's talk a little bit about policy governance. The board of directors makes policies, and policies usually come in four parts. First of all, the expectations. Second, the authorizations. Third, the limitations. And fourth, the communications. The first part of that is the expectations. In other words, the board of directors makes a policy, and they start the policy by saying, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is the outcome. This is the end that we want to have. That policy is then defined from the very beginning by the expectations of the policy. The second part of a policy is the authorization. Okay, we've decided what it is we want to accomplish. Now, who are we authorizing or charging to accomplish that? The third part of a policy is, what are the limitations? What is it that the people who are authorized to accomplish this are not authorized to do? What limitations are placed upon them? And the fourth part of a policy is the communications. What does the board expect in return from, we've authorized you to do this. We've told you what you want to do. We told you not to do this. Now, communicate with us. Do we want you to communicate in writing, verbally? Do you want us to communicate in person or through the president of the club, the CEO, the executive of the club? Or do we want you to communicate once a month at our board meeting or just once a year at our annual meeting? Here's what we want. You're authorized to do it. Don't go beyond your authorization and let us know what's going on. That's policy governance. Of course, the other part of policy governance is that evaluation. The board of directors has charged these people with doing it. Now, they have to evaluate, was this a good policy? Did it work? Did the authorization provide enough authority for people to do it? Were the limitations good enough? And how was the communications? If we're going to continue this policy, do we need to change it? Or is it a policy that needs to be ended? And the final part of policy governance to me is the documentation. Over time, I have been on so many committees, chaired committees, where I'm handed a folder of paper from the prior experiences that tells me how somebody else did it. On occasions, I've been handed folders, binders, 3 or 4 years, 5 or 6 years of how people did it prior experiences, not really evaluating what they did wrong, not really an after action report, just all the paperwork that went through it. They just accumulated the paperwork. Here it is. I would suggest that after action report, in other words, when you're done with your project for your year or whatever the project is, that you report back to the board of directors. You communicate in writing, even better electronically, and that those documentations not be put into a box that gets passed to the next group and eventually gets lost, but goes on electronically on a website, maybe a DAC-BB website, maybe a subfolder on your regular public website, but put someplace that future committees and chairmen can refer back to it. Okay, I've had my say about policy governance. I'm going to give you some examples in another videos, but I think this is important, and I really appreciate you listening to me as I rant a little bit on something that I think is important. Thank you. I'm Steve Garrett.